What I'm about to show you are 3 real events, all involving water, all involving people who thought they were safe, and every single one of them went wrong in a way that nobody expected. The first story involves a professional diver who vanished inside a dam in broad daylight with a full team standing right above him. The second one involves 2 little girls, kids, in a hotel hot tub, with their moms just a few feet away. And the third story, I want you to stick around for the third story because it is the closest thing to a waking nightmare that I have ever covered on this channel, sealed inside a metal chamber, on the ocean floor, in the dark, with no heat and no way out. This is Diving Gone Wrong. Viewer discretion is advised. Like Story 1, the Oxford Dam. About an hour north of Charlotte, North Carolina, there's a long concrete dam stretching across the Catawba River. It's called the Oxford Dam. It was completed back in 1927, and for nearly a century, its large sluice gates have been controlling the flow of water downstream and managing the water level in Lake Hickory. By 1998, the dam was aging, and like anything that old carrying that much responsibility, it needed some serious maintenance work. So on April 16th, a 3-person dive team showed up to seal off some leaks on the valves that were believed to be letting too much water pass through. Before anyone went in the water, the plant workers told the dive team that the valves were in the closed position. Now, that detail is everything, because if those valves are open, the suction force they create is powerful enough to pull a full-grown man right through a pipe. So the divers needed that guarantee before they entered the water. The first diver went down. He came back up. And he told the team that he actually thought the valves were open, not closed. The plant workers confirmed it. He was right. So right from jump, there was either a serious miscommunication or nobody actually checked the valve positions before they sent that diver into the water. They started the winch to close the large gate valve. The plant workers and the dive team took turns cranking it manually. One of the dive team members was the last one on the crank, and when they asked the plant workers if it was fully closed, because the indicator was still showing open, the plant workers told them that indicator never reads fully closed. Just crank it until the handle won't turn anymore. So they did. And then the plant workers told the dive supervisor something that should have stopped everything right there. There was still a serious leak, and that the divers should be, quote, really careful. The supervisor relayed that to his diver, and then he added, take your time. Don't take any chances. We've got plenty of time, and we can figure out a different approach if this feels unsafe. The diver got his helmet on, his harness went on, his umbilical. The long line connecting him to the surface, carrying his air, his communication, everything, was attached and checked. And then he entered the water and started swimming down toward the valve. Then, over the radio, he screamed. He screamed that the current was taking him. The supervisor called back, no response. The line was dead. The team hauled the umbilical up as fast as they could. When it reached the surface, the end that was supposed to be attached to the diver had broken clean off the harness. His air, his communication, gone. The plant workers immediately cycled the gates open, hoping the diver might be flushed through to the other side. Nothing. No sign of him. Rescue divers were called. Both teams searched. The suction force was still dangerous, so they had to move carefully. Hours passed. Finally, over 12 hours after the umbilical snapped, rescue divers managed to get deep inside a lower chamber of the dam, and they found him. He had drowned. His wetsuit was undamaged. His helmet was intact. He hadn't been forced through any small openings, but investigators found that the connection between his lifeline and the main umbilical was missing a small metal piece called a thimble, a simple little component that likely would have kept that rope from separating under pressure. Without it, when the current hit him, the line snapped, and he was pulled into a fully open valve and down into one of the tubes in complete darkness. The Oxford Dam is still operational today. MI story retention beat. Coming up, we're going to hear from a woman named Maddie. She was 7 years old. She and her cousin went to a pool with their moms. And what happened in that hot tub with all the adults just a few feet away is something she says she still thinks about to this day. That story is up next. Don't go anywhere. Story 2, the hot tub. When Maddie was 7 years old, her cousin Alisa, who was 9, went to a local swimming pool with their family. Both of their moms were there. Maddie's newborn baby sister was there, and Maddie's 2 stepbrothers who were quite a bit older and could swim just fine. Neither Maddie nor Alisa knew how to swim. They were using those little arm floaties to get around the pool. They spent a couple of hours splashing around and playing, and eventually got out to have a snack. And because it was a bit chilly for a summer day, they happened to be the only family at the pool that afternoon. The lifeguard on duty saw the kids get out of the water, saw that no other families were around, and decided it was a good time to take his break. He put up his off-duty sign and stepped away from the chair. A few minutes later, Maddie's stepbrothers jumped back into the pool. They were older and fine on their own. And Elisa's mom told the two little girls they had about 15 more minutes before they'd be heading out for the day. Maddie and Elisa really wanted to try the hot tub before they left, so the two of them finished their snack and walked over to it. They stood at the edge and looked at the bubbling water, and then they made the kind of decision that only a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old could make together. They took off their floaties, backed up a few steps, counted to 3, and jumped in. The second Maddie hit the water, she realized what had happened. Both of them sank straight to the bottom, and at that exact moment, Maddie's baby sister started crying. Her mom turned toward the baby. Everyone else was packing up or swimming, and with the noise from the pool, nobody heard what was happening in that hot tub. Maddie screamed underwater. No sound made it to the surface. Hot tubs aren't that deep, but these two girls were small for their ages. Standing straight up at the bottom, their heads were still below the waterline, and in their panic, they were so focused on gasping and pushing off the floor that they couldn't think to move toward the walls, toward safety. On top of that, the jets were running. The bubbles in the water made it even harder to stay afloat. It was chaos. And then something happened that Maddie describes as one of the most disturbing parts of the whole experience. Elisa, her cousin, her friend, the girl she'd been laughing with just moments before, suddenly wasn't her cousin anymore. She was just a body between Maddie and the surface. And Maddie became a body between Elisa and the surface. They started fighting each other, clawing, shoving, pushing each other deeper to get a moment of leverage. They hit each other, they pulled at each other, not out of cruelty, out of pure survival instinct. Because Elisa was older and a little bigger, she started to win. And Maddie started to lose. She fought as hard as she could, but her arms and legs got slower and heavier, until eventually she went completely limp at the bottom of that hot tub, while Elisa continued to thrash above her. Elisa even began kicking her head further down toward the bottom. And then Elisa's foot made contact with the pool floor. Just enough. She pushed off, got her head above the water, and screamed. One scream, that's all it took. Their moms came running. One of them reached in and pulled Maddie up from the bottom. She was unresponsive. They performed CPR on the pool deck. After several rounds, Maddie coughed up water and started breathing again. She survived. Both of them did. Maddie has shared her story publicly to help raise awareness about water safety, and specifically to warn parents about a hazard that almost nobody talks about: the hot tub, the jet bubbles, the slippery walls, and how fast everything can go wrong when a child without floaties hits the water. The lifeguard was terminated, mid-video retention beat. All right, before I get into the final story, I need you to understand what a saturation dive actually is, because without that context, you won't fully grasp how completely and utterly trapped the two men in this next story were. Stay with me, because this one doesn't just go wrong, it goes wrong at 300 feet underwater, in the pitch dark, in the middle of the North Sea, in November, with no heat, no light, no communication, and no way out. This is the story of Michael and Tony. Listing Story 3, The Dive Bell. Saturation diving is considered one of the most dangerous jobs on Earth. When divers need to work at extreme depths, hundreds of feet below the surface, their bodies need time to adjust to the pressure. That process takes days, so instead of diving and resurfacing over and over, saturation divers live in a pressurized chamber on the ship for the entire duration of a job, sometimes weeks at a time. To get to the work site, they travel in something called a dive bell, a small pressurized capsule that is lowered from the ship down to the depth where the work needs to be done. The bell maintains the same pressure as the living chamber, so the divers can transfer in and out without going through decompression each time. It's a remarkable piece of engineering. But what happens when that bell gets cut loose? In November of 1983, the vessel Star Canopus was positioned above the Beryl Alpha oil platform in the North Sea. Two saturation divers, Michael and Tony, were assigned to repair a section of pipe 300 feet below the surface. Michael was the working diver. Tony stayed in the bell as the standby. Michael descended. He got to the work site. It was nighttime, so the only light he had was from the bell and his helmet. The ocean at that depth at night is a different kind of dark, the kind that feels like it's pressing back against you. He started working. 8 minutes in, the captain called down and ordered him to return to the bell immediately because of incoming squalls. He came back. He waited inside the bell for 40 minutes while the weather passed. Then at around 4 a.m. he got back to work. This time he was able to work for an hour and a half. And then the wind shifted 40 knots from the north, sustained. The ship's dynamic positioning system couldn't hold. The captain sounded the alarm. Michael immediately returned to the bell. Tony started pulling in the umbilical cord. As far as both divers were concerned, they were safe. They were inside. The danger was over. But on the surface, the situation was deteriorating fast. The wind drove the Star Canopus into the overhang of the platform, snapping the ship's mast clean off. Debris rained down on the deck. The ship was now being pushed toward another floating platform nearby, the Håkon Magnus. The captain tried to swing the bow away from the Håkon's legs, and he initiated the dive aboard alarm. Pull the bell up now. But dive control called back with a problem. The divers couldn't seal the hatch. In all the movement, the umbilical had wrapped around something underwater before Tony could fully pull it in. It was blocking the hatch from closing. Michael offered to dive out and unhook it. Dive control said absolutely not. Not in these conditions. He could be swept away from the bell at 300 feet with no way back. Instead, they told the divers to throw the helmet into the water and see if that would free the line. It didn't work. The bell smashed against the base of the platform, and somehow, that impact jarred the umbilical just enough. The hatch sealed. The divers called up immediately. The bell began to rise. 300 feet, 270, 240. Tony was calling out the depth. They were coming up, nearly safe, at 98 feet from the surface. Michael stood up and waved his fist. All stop. Dive control stopped the ascent and watched the monitor. Something was wrong. The guide wires, which should have been hanging straight down, were leaning sideways toward the bow. The trolley they were hanging from was shaking violently, and then the video feed cut out. The ship had drifted across the anchor chain of the Håkon Magnus. That chain, massive, iron, under enormous tension, caught the cable connecting the bell to the Star Canopus, and it snapped it. Everything. The cable, the life support lines, the heat supply, the communications, all of it gone. And the bell dropped 300 feet straight down. It hit the ocean floor in complete darkness. Michael and Tony survived the impact, but now they had no light, no heat, no way to contact the surface. And the North Sea in November, even at that depth, is brutally cold. The temperature inside the bell began dropping immediately. On the surface, the Star Canopus was still being battered by the storm. They now had to locate a small metal capsule somewhere on the ocean floor at night, with no transponder signal and no lights. A purely visual search in impossible conditions. And then the divers discovered one final crushing detail. Dive bells normally have a clump weight attached to the bottom, a heavy counterweight to keep the bell from floating up. In emergencies, that weight can be released, and the bell will naturally float to the surface. Standard safety feature. But this particular bell had secondary locking pins on the outside. The only exit, the bottom hatch, was now buried in the seabed. They couldn't get out. They couldn't release the clump weight. They couldn't do anything. They were completely, totally dependent on being found, and they were slowly freezing to death. The bell was first spotted approximately 4 hours after it fell. It was raised from the ocean floor 13 hours later. When the bottom hatch was finally opened, Tony's body fell out into the water. Michael was still inside. Both men were pronounced dead. Michael from hypothermia, Tony from hypothermia and drowning. As a result of this tragedy, dive bells are now required to be equipped with flashing strobe lights for easier location and a transponder to pinpoint their exact position. 2 small changes, way too late for Michael and Tony. Thank you all so much for watching. There is a scary, interesting subreddit where you can submit story suggestions, and I'm also accepting subscriber-submitted stories directly. If something has happened to you that you think fits this channel, send it to the email in the description. I've been getting some genuinely incredible stories from you guys, and a lot of them come with news articles to back them up, which I really appreciate. If you want to support the channel, a like on this video goes a long way. And as always, stay safe out there. I'll see you in the next one.